Story 1. Going into a phone booth, especially when you were a kid, just to jiggle the coin return in hopes of scoring a nickel or dime so you can buy some candy. My cousin Brenda beat me to a phone booth at the beach and got $1.15. She was the first rich person I ever knew. Rest in peace, Brenda. Story 2. Spending hours curating the perfect mix CD, carefully choosing the songs, getting the order just right, and writing the track list in permanent marker like it was a love letter. If someone made you a burned CD, that was real love. Story 3. Dial-up internet. The screechy connection tones and being disconnected because someone answered the landline phone. Story 4. That strange, magical era when you made plans, kept them and just showed up, no text messages, no location tracking, no group chats. Just, see you at 4. And somehow everyone did. Story 5. The desperation to get snacks from the kitchen quickly or go to the bathroom fast during a commercial break while watching an episode you waited all week for. Bonus points if your sibling screams, "It's back!" when you're still out of the room and you have to run back. Story 6. Needing to have a quarter or a dime if you are that old on you just in case you needed to call home with a payphone. Story 7. Or that sacred moment when your favorite song came on the radio and you had to run to hit record on the cassette player, hoping no one spoke over the introduction. Story 8. Actually knowing phone numbers like your parents' number and the numbers of several friends. I still know some of those numbers even today. Story 9. Going to friends' houses by themselves. Going to stores by themselves. Running errands like dropping mail off at the post office drop box. Story 10. If you do not know how to do something or do not know the answer to a question, then you ask your friends or family. If they do not know, you probably will not find out. And you were okay with that. Story 11. We were really poor growing up and couldn't afford to buy VHS tapes. So my parents would record Wonderful World of Disney every Saturday night. Those tapes were destroyed before we could convert them to digital, but they included intermissions with featurettes and interviews with the voice actors and artists. There were many classic late 1990s ads that were annoying to fast forward through as a kid. But I would give anything for those tapes now. I remember getting mad at my dad because Enterprise aired at the same time as Samurai Jack, and we obviously couldn't record both at once. My uncle, who lived on the next street over, would record Samurai Jack and Justice League for me, earning him favorite uncle status for quite some time. Story 12. Before Google, you had to look through an encyclopedia in the library or in a large home collection and possibly spend hours searching, only to still not find what you were looking for. Yes, back then, if your parents or teachers did not know the answer to something, and you could not find it in the library, then you really had no idea how to figure it out. Story 13. Playing video games in a group or in person. Online gaming cannot compare to playing Nintendo 64 GoldenEye, some greasy cheap pizza, and a 2-liter Pepsi with friends. Story 14. Going to Hollywood Video or Blockbuster to rent movies or games for the weekend. Watching television, actual cable, and not using Netflix or any other streaming services. Playing split-screen games. Story 15. People smoking literally everywhere. Airplanes, restaurants, hotels, even hospitals. So much that old technology like typewriters or radios are still often covered in nicotine residue when you find them. It is so rare now that when I come across a smoker, I can't get past the stench. Story 16. When I was a child, if one of my parents was expecting an important telephone call, it meant I was not allowed to use the internet. Story 17. How exciting it was when Pong was invented. We could interact with the square ball on the television. It was incredible. Being able to control the paddle in that exciting up and down movement just seemed so space-age and futuristic. Story 18. Playing outside all day and inventing your own games using your imagination without needing money. Story 19. Blowing into a game cartridge as if your life depended on it, praying it would finally load so you could play Mario before your sibling claimed the television. Story 20. Life before mobile phones. If you had a party or wanted to arrange something, you had to look up your friends' landline numbers in the phone book and ask their parents if you could not speak to them. Also, the joy that was Blockbusters. Story 21. I wish I had even as little as a penny for every time this post gets made. I could quit my job and pay all my bills every month with plenty of money left over. Story 22. If you were privileged, You could rent a camcorder to put on your shoulder to record yourself and your friends having a good time. Story 23. When we teach them about our life and our mistakes, they do not understand and ignore them because they have not faced those problems. Story 24. Riding your bicycle home from school, picking up the house telephone, and calling your mother at work to let her know you arrived safely because you are alone for the next few hours. Story 25. Being seen, not heard. Kids today want to interrupt adults all the time. Growing up, if we interrupted, we got a smack upside the head and were told to go play. Story 26. Renting video cassette recorders from Curtis Mathis on a Friday night before you had one of your own was a big event. Story 27. The ability to ride in the bed of a truck on the highway after seeing a drive-in movie. I miss those dangerous times. Story 28. True boredom. The days when it rained on a random summer day and nothing was on broadcast television. No cable, no internet, no streaming service, no online video games, no smartphones or texting. You were trying to pass the time somehow. Story 29. Lower back pain does not usually start until your 30s. By then, people may be able to download new digital spines if they choose to live as a vertebrate in the metaverse. Story 30. Getting lost and needing to find a pay telephone to contact someone, hoping to find the change for it. Story 31. Other than farm kids, work. We have a group of late teenagers and early 20s at my job, and they are all soft. They have never had to do a real day's work. It is sad. Story 32. With each generation aging to adulthood, the new generation inherits all the negatives and drama from previous generations, along with new issues, and they are largely powerless to address them. Each generation has its own perspective on the challenges and tends to be stuck in its own thoughts and opinions, often ignoring new issues. Additionally, the generation that holds most of the wealth and power rarely seems to care. They usually focus more on maintaining power rather than using it for the greater good or teaching those who come after how to assume responsibility when they pass on. Story 33. No video to remember things by when you do extremely dangerous activities that only you, your brothers, and a few friends will ever know about, like climbing onto the cables beneath the Golden Gate Bridge, blowing up propane canisters in the desert, or tubing down the American River over rapids without a life vest. Essentially, nothing I would ever allow my children or grandchildren to do. The age of no permanent record. Story 34. Growing up playing with toys and other kids, using a dial-up internet connection on the first family computer, and having a computer with only 64 to 128 megabytes of memory. Creating a research paper saved on a floppy disk. Calling your parents to say you're home late because the train was delayed, using a Nokia 3310, and enjoying a game of Snake to pass the time. No social media or influencers to follow. YouTube was mainly a platform to watch video clips. Not every application and platform requiring you to subscribe. Listening to music by inserting a CD into a Discman, and later downloading music illegally to put on an MP3 player. Watching movies on VHS. Story 35. The conversations you could have when nobody could just pull out their phone and completely zone everyone out whenever they felt like it. Story 36. Having the television on a specific channel to watch movies or play video games was common. I cannot remember the last time I used a radio frequency adapter. Story 37. The song Parents Just Do Not Understand was very popular when originally released in the 1980s by DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. Story 38. How unkind some parents from the baby boomer generation were. I realized the other day that my daughter has almost never cried for most of her life outside of infancy and toddlerhood. As a child, I cried weekly from being screamed at, punished, hit with various objects, and threatened. Story 39. The same adults who taught them to never believe everything you read on the internet went on to believe everything they read online. Story 40. Freaking. Using a payphone to make free calls by shorting a ground or playing the correct tones on a pocket dialer. Using toll-free numbers to route long-distance calls. Taking control of a phone switchboard in a building to listen to phone calls or connecting a laptop to access the internet. Obtaining a police scanner from Radio Shack and modifying it to listen to cell phone conversations. Using a kid's walkie-talkie to listen to cordless phone conversations in the neighborhood. using a cordless phone handset to find an open line in an apartment complex. It was straightforward and free if you knew how to do it. All of this is highly illegal. Now everything is digital. There are no hard lines. Story 41. Meeting friends, coordinating plans, and so on without a cell phone. In retrospect, I still can't believe we actually met up with anyone. Story 42. Blowing into a physical copy of a video game to get it to work. You can also play a game without having to download anything. Wild times. Story 43. Missing an episode of your show and having to wait months to catch it on reruns, most likely out of order. Story 44. The American dream was, for about half a generation, real. If you were born at just the right time in the United States, you could afford a real house, a car, and a family complete with education and medical care expenses on a single income. That kind of wealth has been siphoned up by people with yachts, offshore accounts, and private jets. Story 45. Recording songs from the radio onto cassette tapes. There was a time, not long ago, when we did not carry phones or mini computers in our pockets. Story 46. Life before social media. I remember just asking for phone numbers of people I wanted to stay in contact with. And now people ask, what is your Instagram, Facebook, Discord, or other social media? Instead of just, what is your phone number? Story 47. Running after school or even skipping the last class to watch Dragon Ball on television. Then discussing the episode extensively the next day. Story 48. Millennials had to learn how to code on their own to set their MySpace profiles the way they wanted. Story 49. Everyone experiences events they do not like. It is not always trauma. Sometimes you have to accept it and cope. Story 50. Commercial breaks and the inability to stream on demand. Television shows have 22 episodes per season spread out over several months. These shows repeat that cycle every year, rather than waiting every 2 years for 6 to 8 episodes. Story 51. The ease of finding entertainment with movies and video games has greatly improved. In the past, my dad would take us to the video store, which was a significant event. We looked forward to choosing a movie or video game for the weekend. Nowadays, the average child has access to many entertainment options at once. When I hear children say they are bored, I wonder how that is possible. Story 52. How to entertain yourself in the absence of the internet. I would put on my parents' CDs and just dance like a weirdo with my sister. It was great. Story 53. Sitting there holding my boyfriend's hand tightly and holding my breath while they pull a number out of a bowl on television that will reveal who is going to get drafted to go to Vietnam. Story 54. The excitement and responsibility of being left alone to do whatever. Having a house key, a bicycle, and some pocket money was all we needed. Story 55. Oh God. As a female at age 47, where does one begin? There is so much, and it is sad, but it is the way of the world, evolution, I suppose. Story 56. There was a time when people avoided using their phone speaker in public places, such as public transportation or hospital waiting rooms, out of consideration for others. Story 57. Having your parents literally beat you. Until that happened to me, I thought it was just a figure of speech. Story 58. Waiting until 9 p.m. to call grandma because long-distance charges were lower if the call was outside your town. The 2 or 3 television channels you received signed off for the night around 11 p.m. Going to McDonald's and getting change from your dollar. The food at McDonald's was actually tasty. Playing outside with your friends, making up your own games until the streetlights came on. Story 59. Leaving the house without anyone knowing where you were, when you would return, or being able to contact you. You could simply disappear. Story 60. I asked my 20-year-old niece if she could drive to a specific address in Minnesota without her phone. She said yes, so I asked how. She said with a map. I said start, and she immediately picked up her phone. Story 61. The fact that Westerners would have remained in their jungles painting themselves blue if it were not for a few groups that set sail and realized they could bully the people they discovered into submission and steal things they had already made, introducing war, cultures of hate, and division. That is why we are very industrialized today, because we also perpetuated the worst form of slavery the world has seen. If questioned, We control the media to deflect attention to the Arab world or something similar, where immigrants actually have it much better. Now go to bed and trust no one. Also, watch true crime from every nation to compare just how evil the Western world really is, but be absolutely grateful for being born in the West. If my children are born elsewhere, it would be my mission that they never discover the West until they are 18 at the earliest. Story 62. No internet or cell phone. Playing outside with friends unsupervised and exploring the neighborhood freely. Story 63. Your telephone was a fixture in your house, attached to the wall with a cord, and that was it. Your only privacy was limited to the room it was installed in. You held a large, clunky device to the side of your head. Story 64. Playing outside. I think I started leaving the house to play outside at the age of 4. Kids today are so digitized and would not be allowed that autonomy and freedom anyway. Story 65. Rotary dial phones, maps instead of global positioning system, Saturday morning cartoons, no microwaves, cell phones, air fryers or electric cars, dial-up internet, encyclopedias, a time when there were no computers in every home or in every hand, talking to each other at dinner instead of everyone on their phones, playing outside and inventing their own games, no cable television. So many things have come into existence since I was a child. Story 66. This sound. Story 67. Being able to avoid grounding for breaking curfew by saying, I wanted to call. I did. There were no phones available. Story 68. Just being bored and finding new ways to entertain yourself. I am 47, and yes, we had video games that we got to play when our mothers let us on the one television we had, which was not as often as we would have liked. We did not have entertainment on demand in the palm of our hands. Sometimes, no matter what material you had in your house, you were just bored. You would read a random encyclopedia from the set your mother bought at the grocery store, book by book, month after month, until you had the full set. If your neighborhood best friend was not home, you would stand out in the yard poking things with sticks or looking for animals, or just seeing how much water it took to make mud in the bare patch in the backyard where your dog dug. If they were home, you would go to the park on your bikes, play on the jungle gym 14 feet in the air with no supervision or safety features, sneak into the kitchen at one of your houses to raid the candy stash, or annoy your older siblings who were busy doing grown-up things like talking on the phone or putting on nail polish. I do not have children, so maybe they all do this still, but judging by the kids in the neighborhood, it does not seem like they do. Story 69. My cordless phone keypad failed, so I used the hang-up button to dial in the mid-1990s. It worked fine that way. Story 70. There was a time when it was possible that politicians truly had the best interests of the people in mind when making decisions. Story 71. When you left the house in the morning, your parents had no idea where you were, what you were doing, and absolutely no way of contacting you. And yes, we did not carry water bottles or cups everywhere. Story 72. Watching strange old movies late at night on the ultra-high frequency channels instead of those 30-minute infomercials. Those had not been invented yet. Story 73. Not having the internet available ever. The pre-internet world was a completely alien place compared to today. Story 74. Having to memorize phone numbers instead of saving them on your phone. What is a landline, anyway? Story 75. Road trip using a paper map you picked up at the gas station and no phones until you got to the next town and used a quarter to make a call. Story 76. Before Reaganism, there were well-paying jobs with full benefits. Only one family member had to work for the rest of their life. Corporations actually paid taxes back then. Reagan changed that. Corporations now pay less taxes than the average American. All this misery is caused by the greedy, racist Republican Party. Story 77. Buying a physical guide for a video game is becoming increasingly rare, just like buying a video game in real life. Story 78. I tried to explain Blockbuster, video home system, and rewinding to my 6-year-old, who is absolutely brilliant, but she couldn't begin to understand what I was talking about. I realized halfway through that I had no references she would recognize. I said, "You had to rewind it like a cassette tape," and then I realized she had no idea what that was either. If anyone can think of a way to explain video home system to a child, please let me know because I have no ideas. Story 79. We were in a remote area, and rabbit ear antennas gave us about 4 channels. I think 2 were the same network, so they would play the same shows. There was nothing to do but go outside and create your own entertainment. That's what kids did. I would ride my bike all day long, find other kids to hang out with, go to a river or explore the woods. Would I have done any of that if it had not been for the internet and all the entertainment I could access instantly? Absolutely not. Story 80. You could just go outside to ride a bicycle or hang out with friends, and nobody could contact you. Sweet, sweet freedom. Story 81. Not being accessible 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to anyone, including your parents. There is a level of privacy we will never have again and therefore should never allow our children to have. Story 82. The pure joy of having someone pull up on your rear bumper while stopped on a hill with a manual transmission. Story 83. Renting a video game from Blockbuster. I feel like most kids know what a Redbox is, but they don't have Wii games. Story 84. Total freedom during the summer. With all the issues in the world, it is hard to let your children run the streets until dusk. I was gone from breakfast until dusk for 3 months with a bicycle, skateboard, very little money, and 2 good friends. Story 85. Playing outside all day long, coming home only to eat and then back out again, coming home for supper, out again until the streetlights came on. No one knew where you were or what you were doing. No one asked and no one told. Story 86. Having to use calling cards to call family in different countries. Having to call people after 9 p.m. because that was when it was free. Story 87. The phone rang in the middle of the night to ask Dad if he would come to the hospital and give someone a blood transfusion. Story 88. That all of their world is so incredibly new. I got my first smartphone in 2011 or 2012, and it was still considered a new and exciting thing, as most people I knew did not have them yet. That was only 13 years ago. Since then, technology and the culture surrounding it have advanced so quickly they would not believe it. People wonder why governments are not taking action regarding smartphone use and the unfiltered internet young people access, but that is mostly because it takes a long time to get things through government, and on a global scale it has not been long enough to get all that sorted. Story 89. There was a time when most people felt alone because we did not have the internet to let us know there were other people who also felt alone. Story 90. Literally having to print out directions to somewhere. The stress level was immense. The printer never worked, I missed the turn, and the odometer was not accurate. It was truly a nightmare. Story 91. Living without the internet and being able to roam freely without supervision at a young age. My friends and I went all over town on our bikes, and nobody cared as long as we were home when the streetlights came on. We even had commercials on television that aired at night saying, "It is 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?" Story 92. Buying a Thomas guide to find your way somewhere for $40. Getting advice on how to find locations using the Thomas guide numbering system to get you within 6 blocks or so. I live at a 26. Story 93. Using a phone book to look for company numbers. If you wanted a pizza, you had to look up the number in the phone book if you did not know it by heart. Story 94. Friends bringing digital video discs to my sleepover and then choosing which one to watch, rather than crowding around a tablet and spending more than 2 hours choosing what movie to download. Story 95. The difficulty of playing your Game Boy in the back of the car, using the streetlights to see anything. Story 96. Example of what I grew up with. Early 2010s elementary school. Works with any 2 names. Always used this to taunt people I did not like. Caitlin and Matthew sitting in a tree, kissing. First comes love, then comes marriage, then comes a baby in a baby carriage. Sucking his thumb, wetting his pants, doing the hula dance. Story 97. Having to memorize all the important phone numbers in your life because you did not have a smartphone in your pocket. Story 98. Trying to watch adult content on dial-up internet. I was about 13 years old at the time, so I was very scared of getting caught because the image took 4 minutes to load. Story 99. Having no escape from awkward situations. A mutual friend just introduced you to and then left you alone. You used to have to try making small talk and find some common ground. Children nowadays can just escape into their phones. Story 100. Trying to call someone and getting a busy tone. Waiting for the internet to dial up or waiting for the page to load. Rewinding a VHS tape. I was talking to my kids about this one and how exciting it was when DVDs came out. Another one I recently told my kids about is getting lost and having to stop and ask someone for directions. Story 101. Telephone books allowed you to look up people's phone numbers and addresses, whether they wanted you to or not, unless they had an unlisted number. The yellow pages were included with business listings and advertisements. There were no online reviews like Yelp. Any reviews were found only in newspapers. In almost all cases, you had to call to find out business hours. You would speak to a live person when calling a business to ask about hours or make other inquiries. Story 102. For me, aged 63, that day is frozen in time down to the tiniest detail. Overwhelming emotions of shock, fear, anger, and confusion. For anyone born in this millennium, they either have no idea it happened or, if they do know, they cannot conceive of the magnitude. So it is not their generation's "where were you when" moment. Story 103. Being free is like when you leave the house and there are no tracking devices on you and no cameras everywhere. Story 104. Holding face-to-face conversations. No children born today will ever have the chance to know the world without significant radioactive contamination. Archaeology can easily distinguish pre-Chernobyl and post-Chernobyl objects due to the massive increase in contamination that occurred then. Poor safety protocols have caused many disastrous outcomes both locally and globally. For example, the Bhopal incident devastated an entire population because of unsafe practices in that factory. It would be wonderful if future generations never had to experience such disasters in their lives. Story 105. What it was like to exist before we were on cameras everywhere we go and everything we say was monitored online. Story 106. Too many things might be important. I have no idea what effect all this internet activity will have in the end. However, I suspect something negative. Story 107. Waiting around for your favorite show on television or favorite song on the radio, knowing that if you missed it, too bad. You have to wait until next time. Story 108. Spending your day at the shopping center just because, and I know you can do that now, but the shopping center when I was growing up was much better. I was a frequent visitor. Story 109. That sound the modem made as you waited in anticipation of being able to connect to the internet. Also, the frustration you felt when you realized someone was using the landline. Story 110. A phone on the wall, being the only phone in the house. Going outside until the streetlights came on. Writing in cursive. Having to get parents' cigarettes at the store. Story 111. Station wagons with back windows that rolled down. Riding with your friend in the back, and making faces at people behind you at red lights. Story 112. When you found yourself in a fight with a bully, both of you had to be face to face. You could not hide behind a computer. There were many witnesses, including the teachers. Growing up, teachers rarely enforced the zero-tolerance policy and punished you only if you threw the first punch. If it was a dance-off, teachers could not do much since it was a contest to see who was the better dancer, as they could easily beat the daylights out of you. Story 113. Waiting to watch your favorite television show until it aired at a specific time. No streaming, no binge watching, just a set schedule. Story 114. Life is not a series of 30-second clips. Likes do not matter. Owning media such as compact discs, digital versatile discs, and games is better than streaming. Story 115. Splicing and taping reel to edit. The miracle of the International Business Machine's Selectric typewriter. It could white out with one key. The smell of the mimeograph machine. Yellow or white pages phone books. The centerpiece to snap into 45 RPM records. Letters instead of numbers for your phone number. Party lines. Gazing at album art. Story 116. Plain old telephone service, especially rotary phones. Floppy disks. Tapes. Analog television. X-Face and Face email avatar headers. The Geek Code and its variants. These were actually quite nice, and I am helping bring them back in an extended way. Skype, ICQ, Friendster. Good times, Skype, good times indeed. The time when forums were more popular than Discord servers. When the internet was a wild west. I feel like making the internet less bland is good. Skeuomorphic design. I do that. Dial up beyond just rural areas. Story 117. Literally anything outdated. People have long been misled into believing that outdated means not good. Story 118. Well, I bet it was already said, but I will say it again. Knock-knock jokes or any colloquialisms you use for them just really do not happen, and I doubt they will return, especially when people have drone robots in the sky above their houses to alert them. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.